Well, we're here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, and today we're being joined by Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, and we got a lot of things to talk about with HPAI. Senator, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
It is always great to be with you, Dustin. Thanks so much.
All right, so we're talking HPAI, and that's something we've been battling for years. I mean, going back to 2015, but then we had a little bit of a break, but it's been something that's been rearing its ugly head a lot here in the last couple of years, and I know the government's been looking at ways to try to help mitigate the problems we've been having, and we got some big announcements just yesterday. Senator, if you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on with that.
Yes, absolutely. So, Secretary Rollins, our brand new United States Department of Agriculture secretary, man, she was thrown right into the fire with the HPAI spread. So, she came out with a plan from USDA yesterday and outlined a number of ideas, a path forward, including higher indemnity payments for our producers, producing vaccinations that will hopefully prevent the spread and development of other variants of the virus. And then, of course, increase biosecurity measures. And all of those things were things that I had also suggested in a bipartisan letter that I had sent to the secretary with the assistance of my Democratic colleague, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. So it's wonderful to work with Secretary Rollins. She is a go-getter and she gets this. We've talked about the agricultural issues, especially as it pertains to HPAI, a number of other issues that she's going to be challenged with in the early parts of this term. But again, I'm glad to see that she's rolling this out so quickly and actively engaged with our producers.
Now, talking about a few of those parts that you were talking about, the larger indemnity payments. First of all, let's talk about that. What was the situation we had, and why was it important that we address that part of it?
Well, we have seen in years past, especially as we came through 2015, it was very hard. Indemnity, of course, we hadn't done this for a very long time. And so we have seen payments that were too low, and then we saw them go too high, and then brought it back to the middle. I mean, it's been back and forth. And we just have to make sure that it is right for our producers. And as we work through this, this certainly it didn't directly impact turkeys this time as far as some of the plans that Secretary Rollins had laid out. But there are different payments, whether it's a laying hen or a broiler or turkey, all of those different things. So we're going to have to work through this as we move forward. But I do think we're on a great path for our producers, and we can adjust as necessary. But again, I'm glad to see that Secretary Rollins is really jumping in. She's going knee deep in this already, and we're just really thankful that she's so actively engaged and especially responsive to those of us here in Congress.
Now, talking about the biosecurity part of it as well, we know that here in Iowa, the IDALS has been really top of the line on making sure everything is not spreading and that everything is being taken care of. I mean, is this something that we're trying to push towards a national level, or has it been state by state, or is it more of a USDA really just toughening up those guidances? Where are we finding ourselves there?
Yeah, I think it's guidance, and obviously our states will have their input as well. But what we want to do is make sure that the best techniques are utilized out there, and it's tough because we see even in facilities that have the best biosecurity, it still can find a way. So we've got to figure out how it's spreading, how it's being transmitted, and do absolutely the best we can in making sure that the facilities are safe. Part of the problem, though, is that we do have backyard flocks that are being impacted. So, smaller farms that have free range chickens out there. I think about my dad and my stepmom, and their chickens just run everywhere. And of course, when you have geese that fly overhead and they're leaving their droppings behind, it's being transmitted in so many different ways. A big concern is that transmission is now happening not just within the buildings of some of these facilities, but then we also see a spread now to dairy herds and transmission to people. So we've got to figure this out, and we have to make sure that there's research behind it and proper science to help inhibit that spread. So a lot yet to do, Dustin, but this is the start of a good plan forward to combat HPAI.
And of course, when we think about it, we know going to the grocery stores, we see the prices of eggs, and we know that a lot of the stores are saying, this is tied to the fact that we lose flocks. When one gets sick, you have to depopulate the whole flock, and it takes time to rebuild. But in the end, if we can get ahead of this will maybe help get further down the line. I mean, the joke has been right now the Powerball is up to 6 dozen eggs right now, the way things are going, and so by getting ahead of this, we can hopefully alleviate some of that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it has been awful. And we know that, of course, eggs, what a great source of protein. It's such a healthy food. And the prices have gone through the roof. And especially for those that are most vulnerable in our population, making sure that they're able to feed their families on a budget. This has been really tough because we want them to have access to eggs. We've seen stores that don't have eggs available, or limiting the number of dozens that consumers can pick up as they go to the grocery store. So it's a huge impact. And yeah, I've seen so many memes lately surrounding eggs. That was the joke on Valentine's Day. A girlfriend says, "Buy me something expensive," and the boyfriend shows up with a dozen eggs.
And of course, as long as we're talking about that, I mean, how much of this could be aided or have been a little bit easier to have taken care of if we would have had a new farm bill in place? I know it's something we've been talking about quite a bit lately, Senator.
Well, I will always say we need a farm bill yesterday. So, but I can't tell you that it would have been easier. But certainly, when we're looking at dollars that need to be invested in research and development, if we had already had some of that in place, most certainly it would be very smooth. But we are where we are. So let's drive on. Let's get a farm bill done. Let's make sure that we are looking at new ways to either vaccinate our birds or find other ways that we can prevent the spread. So hindsight 2020, wish we would have had a farm bill, but we'll move forward now.
And if I may, before we wrap up today, I know we were talking to some farmers here in Iowa, Senator, and a lot of them were worried about their EQIP programs and their payments and some of the conservation programs that have been in the Farm Bill and are worried about the future of it. We know the president has been very much into trying to cut budgets and cut things where he can to save money and pay down the deficit and talk about that kind of thing. But, a lot of these farmers that have put a lot of effort into this, and Iowa is no stranger to these programs, they're kind of worried about the future of those programs and how much of it can we be assured that could make into a new farm bill. I mean, is there going to be enough support to do that where the president will support those kinds of programs?
Yeah, I know there was a lot of concern about this, and I heard immediately from a number of people down in my area, a lot of the farmers. One of my dear friends that actually works for conservation, he had texted me, and it was this onslaught of calls and texts, and I'm glad that they were engaging, and that's what I need to hear from our Iowa farmers and those that are engaged in conservation services. But the EQIP dollars have been unfrozen. So that's important to understand. The reason that the dollars had been frozen is because part of those dollars were from the IRA bill that passed. It was a very partisan bill that passed under President Joe Biden. So that's why they wanted to scrutinize what was in that bill and the funding that was being pushed out through that bill. The original EQIP, it was part of the 1996 Farm Bill. It is a great program. So I think you see great support here in the Senate and in the House. So Congress is fully on board with it. I know that the president will be briefed on it, of course, by people like Secretary Rollins and others. So I anticipate that there will be big support for this in the future as well. But again, going back to the reason EQIP was frozen temporarily was because some of those funding dollars came through a very liberal bill that the agency heads wanted to scrutinize before they released those dollars.
All right. Well, Senator, we thank you so much for the update on what's going on with the HPAI situation and also that update on what was going on with those equip dollars. We appreciate you taking the time to visit with us as always.
Yeah, of course, Dustin. Great to see you. Thank you.